Welcome to Trial of the Hollywood Sex Therapist Killer, the harrowing and tragic story of Dr. Amie Harwick, who met a tragic end when she was allegedly thrown off her third-floor balcony by her stalker and ex-boyfriend, Gareth Pursehouse. Found clinging to life, but later succumbing to her injuries, Amie's death has raised many questions, with answers to be revealed in court. Join us as we dive deep into the ongoing trial of Gareth Pursehouse, the man accused of this heinous act, and as we seek justice for Amie.
I have so much I need to say. Please give me a chance to just say it. So I could have just said it. Please. Please. Can we meet again? It feels the same as when I wrote you. That long list of what I would miss about you and heard nothing back. Just reaching out into the darkness, trying to stop falling. I wish I could do something more, but reaching out to you is a crippling action that I had actually contemplated over the past few months, just to say to you the word help. Admitting to you how hurt I am is so embarrassing and painful, which demolishes me even more. Please don't vanish on me. Please, please, don't let me go through that again. Please call me. These are the messages that Gareth Pursehouse sends Amie Harwick after unexpectedly running into her after having not seen her for nearly 8 years. Running into her out of the blue on January 16, 2020, sent him into a deep, debilitating depression that he was not able to overcome. He was begging with her for help. He was begging and pleading with her for a chance to talk to her. The evidence will show that running into her at that event sent him into a thick fog of depression and made him feel that the only way he could get relief from that pain was to go to talk to her. The ultimate answer that you, ladies and gentlemen, are asked, the ultimate question that you will be asked to answer is what Gareth Pursehouse intended to do when he broke into her house on the 14th of February in 2020. The evidence will show that he was reacting from within this fog of depression, and that he was going to talk to her. That his only intention that night was to speak to her. The evidence will show that he never intended on killing her. The evidence will show that he is not guilty of first-degree premeditated murder, and he is not guilty of the special circumstance of lying in wait. Amie Harwick and Gareth Pursehouse had a romantic relationship from 2009. This began in 2009. They lived together for a little over a year until sometime in 2011. When they split up, Gareth Pursehouse was never the same. Losing Amie Harwick sent him into a debilitating, crushing depression. It made it hard for him to function. He even lost a job that he had at the time because of that. The heartbreak that he suffered changed him. He tried to move past it, but he couldn't. He tried to move alongside it by seeking release through exercise, travel, dating other women, but those were only temporary respites. Those didn't work. He distanced himself from other people. He wouldn't let himself become emotionally vulnerable with other women. He had suffered, the threshold had been reached of his heartbreak, and he couldn't risk another one. He wouldn't survive it. So when he sees Amie Harwick on the red carpet, or waiting for the red carpet, at an event that he had been working for many years as a side gig, photographing attendees at this award ceremony that happens every year in downtown Los Angeles, he completely loses control of his emotions. He literally falls to the floor. And he's hyperventilating, he's sobbing, he's shaking. And with Amie's encouragement, he's able to stand up. And the two of them walk off and talk. They sit down on a bench. And he's able, through talking to her, to regain his composure. After about 30 or 40 minutes, Miss Harwick's friend, who she came to the event with, Fernando Chavez, comes up to the two of them and says, hey, the red carpet's about to close. If we want to get pictures on the red carpet, we have to go. And so he cuts the conversation short. And to him, it seemed like Gareth was disappointed and upset at having the conversation cut short. Gareth goes and finds his friends that were at the event. You'll hear from them who will say that he seemed distraught, that he was sobbing uncontrollably, that it was pathetic how sad he was from their perspective, and that they told him to pull himself together. He was on the clock. He was being paid to photograph people there that night, and they tried to help. Later that night, Gareth walks up to the table that Fernando Chavez and Amie Harwick were seated at during the program of the event. He kneels down and he whispers, "Can we talk again tonight?" Amie says, okay. Shortly thereafter, the two of them go back and sit back down on the bench and talk again, a second time. At some point in the conversation, after about 45 minutes, Ms. Harwick tells Gareth, look, I have to go meet my friend, Fernando Chavez. I have to go. He asks if they can meet again and continue talking. She says that's not a good idea. The next day, the 17th, the text messages that I read in the very beginning are sent by Gareth to Amie. He's pleading with her. Please, I need to talk to you again. I need to continue this conversation. The following day, on the 18th, at about 4 p.m., he leaves her this voicemail.
I have so much I need to say. Please give me a chance to just say it so I can accept it. Please. Please.
Ms. Harwick didn't respond to his pleas for help. She blocked his number. In the days after this encounter, a friend of Gareth's notices that he seems depressed. Elmira Minnesota. To her, it seems that he's down, he's depressed, and so she asks him, "Are you okay?" He says, "I'm rarely okay." He describes his state of mind as if he was having a chain pulling down on him that he likes to, or that he pretends doesn't exist, but that cripples him in so many ways in life. Ms. Minnesota is concerned. Ms. Minnesota is concerned that he might hurt himself. Ms. Minnesota suggests things that he could do to try to alleviate this pain and get over this heartbreak and move past this depression. But because of the depth of depression that he was in and the state of mind that he was in, the only thing that he felt he could do in that moment to seek any sort of release from this depression was to talk to Amie. So on February 14th, he decided he couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't take this pain anymore.
I'm going to check argument.
Sustained.
The evidence will show, and circumstantial evidence, text messages, voicemails, observations from other people will show that Gareth felt he couldn't continue living with this pain, and that he needed to finish the conversation that had been interrupted at the XBiz Awards, and that he needed to have this conversation that he so desperately and so kind of sadly begged her for. And that if he wasn't able to have this conversation, that it wasn't worth living, that he wouldn't be able to continue carrying on.
I'm going to check foundation and
Sustained.
While in this grip of utter despair, he grabs a nicotine-filled syringe from his house.
All right, let's approach.
As Mr. Avila said in his opening argument, there is evidence that Mr. Pursehouse possessed a syringe, brought it from his house, and brought it to Ms. Harwick's house. You will hear testimony from the officers who searched the house that they found it on the balcony. And they found it still with its cap on and still with liquid inside. One reason, this is a piece of circumstantial evidence that you will hear a lot about later on in this trial, that now is not the time to get into. But this is a piece of circumstantial evidence. One reasonable inference of him bringing the syringe to her house and inside of her house is that he intended to kill her. Another reasonable inference is that he brought it intending to kill himself. The circumstantial evidence, the messages he sent, the voicemail he left, the observations of other people at the XBiz Awards, the observations of Ms. Minnesota, will show that he was in a depressed state of mind. Now, he breaks into her house in this state of mind, and he is waiting there for hours so that he can have this conversation. When Ms. Harwick comes home, there's a struggle. As Mr. Arya said, Michael Herman is her housemate. He lives in a room that's on the ground floor. It has a door out to the balcony. And he wakes up to a scream. He wakes up to what he thinks is Amie Harwick's scream. At first, he thinks it's the kind of scream that you would make when you see like a mouse or a cockroach or something. But then he realizes, no, she's continuing to scream. So he gets out of bed and he walks over, or goes over to the foot of the stairs, and he shouts up once, "Amie!" He continues to hear sounds. So he goes into his room and looks for his keys and his phone, which he can't find. He's continuing to hear sounds from above, and he goes back to the foot of the stairs, and he shouts up in the upward direction, up towards her room on the top floor, "Hey, motherfucker!" And then he runs out through the patio, around the side of the house, through the front courtyard area. And because he couldn't find his keys and his phone, he has to climb up and over this wrought iron fence. He goes and he knocks on neighbors' doors, trying to get help, but no one opens their doors. He eventually sees a stranger walking down the street, and he asks the stranger to use his phone. The stranger calls 911, and the police arrive. 2 officers arrive after a brief discussion with Mr. Herman. The 3 of them climb up and over the wrought iron fence. They go back down the side of the house, and when they round the corner, into the patio area, they see Miss Harwick. She's face down. She's non-responsive, gravely injured, but still alive. She's beneath the balcony, which is a little over, the floor of the balcony is a little over 20 feet above the patio where Miss Harwick was found. And, they take Miss Harwick to Cedars-Sinai, where doctors try to save her life and are unsuccessful. And she tragically passes away that night. You're going to hear from Dr. Scott Lucy, who performed the autopsy. And he's going to testify that he formed an opinion as to the cause of death. And that the cause of death that he opined, based on his autopsy, was blunt force trauma to the head and torso. That he also found evidence of manual strangulation, and he also found evidence of an altercation with injuries consistent with defensive and assaultive wounds. You're also going to hear from forensic scientist Bob Malik. He is a accident reconstructionist, and he's going to testify that he performed a fall analysis, that he used what's called finite analysis to look at the possible ways in which Miss Harwick could have arrived in the location that she was at. He's going to talk about the investigation that he did of the scene. He's going to talk about all of the video, photographs, and documents that he reviewed of the police investigation. He's going to talk about how one can use mathematical equations and scientific principles based on physics and biomechanics to look at the parameters of where someone came to rest and look at their center of mass and their location and orientation and relationship to the things that are in that space, such as, in this case, the balcony, the awning, the house, to identify the possible starting points that could have resulted in her place of rest. And you're going to hear from Mr. Malik that he was able to exclude a number of scenarios, and he was able to identify a number of possible scenarios, two of which are likely. And you're going to hear from Mr. Malik that one of those likely scenarios is that she was hanging from the outside of the balcony.
Objection.
Yeah, but the court stated that it would allow the possible scenarios. Go ahead.
Right. You'll hear this in great detail from his testimony, how he excluded certain scenarios, how he arrived at other scenarios, and from within those whittled down the scenarios to what are likely based on the science. And one of them is that she was hanging apologies for the quality. You'll see still images using these mannequin dummies like this, and then you also see a video representation that corresponds with the calculations and analysis that we did. And you'll see, you'll hear from him and explain the foundation and basis for this, but he'll explain how one of the likely scenarios is that she was gripping the balcony railing with either 1 or 2 feet, using the awning to brace her weight, and fell from that position. You're also going to see a photograph of damage to the awning. Beneath and kind of recessed under the balcony. It's kind of hard to tell there, but there you'll also see a close-up image that shows damage to the front side of the awning in a location consistent with where somebody would place their foot to brace their weight. You're also going to see in this trial this photograph, a photo shoot she did where she's posing here on the balcony. And this is not shown for purposes of the clothing she's wearing or anything like that. But you'll see that she had a certain comfort level with the balcony railing. You'll hear that she was an athletic, acrobatic person and that for years she was a dancer. So, in this trial, you will hear testimony and you will see evidence presented before you that shows you that one likely scenario for how Ms. Harwick came to rest where she did in the patio is that she comes home, encounters Mr. Pursehouse, screams, waking up Michael Herman, causing him to go to the foot of the stairs. He shouts up at them. Upon hearing him shouting up, a struggle occurs between Ms. Harwick and Mr. Pursehouse. In a panic, she runs through her bedroom to her balcony, climbs up and over the railing, attempts to lower herself or climb down, and is unsuccessful and falls. The evidence will show that, yes, Gareth Pursehouse was waiting in her home. He broke into her home. Had he not been there, she wouldn't have died that night. That is not in dispute. He set a chain of actions into motion that led to her death. But the evidence will show that he never intended on killing her. At the end of this trial, the defense is going to ask you to convict him of a crime that fits the circumstances and facts of this case. But the evidence will show that he is not guilty of first-degree premeditated murder, and that he is not guilty of the special circumstance of lying in wait. Thank you.
All right, thank you, counsel. Are you prepared to call your first witness, counsel?
Yes.
You may.
We'll call Rebecca Kimball.
All right.
More of the trial of the Hollywood sex therapist killer is on the way. Press subscribe now so you don't miss a moment of this riveting courtroom drama as we seek justice for Dr. Amie Harwick.